Hello and welcome to the latest episode of First Word in Sport. James, how are you on this lovely rainy Friday morning?
Fantastic, Luke. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it hasn't stopped raining here in London for the best part of 48 hours. It's beginning to annoy me. Take me back to some winter sun somewhere, please. How are you, Luke?
Yep, not too bad. Thank you, James. Obviously, an interesting week of Champions League and Europa League football. Any particular standout highlights for you? I mean, obviously, Man City losing away at Bodo Glimt 3-1 was a bit of a shocker.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned it briefly, didn't we? It was a 4-hour flight up to the Arctic Circle, cold, Astro pitch, few injuries, Gahey and Semenyo unavailable. Yeah, bad result, bad performance, strange team selection by Pep. El Nouri right back, have a word with yourself. What is that all about? Harden looks like he's what he is. He's just tired, not getting much service. They look to shadow themselves, asking way too much of their centre-backs, Kusanov and Aileen, pushing up, playing a ridiculously high line like they did against Man United. I don't understand that, considering the way they played away at Newcastle when they played a little bit more further back and they got exploited. A couple of great finishes from the Norwegian lads. One guy stuck in the top corner, Jorge or something. Donnarumma saved him a couple of times as well. Could have been a lot worse. I mean, yeah, Elaine should have scored that header in the first couple of minutes, and Harden might have taken that chance if in form. But apart from that, City are a mess. And you can clip it now. Guardiola's finished. He's gone. He won't be at the club in the summer, I don't think. They'll be looking for a new manager. They won't finish in top 8 Champions League. I know they've got to play at home to Galatasaray on Wednesday night. But they are a mess at the moment.
I think what was interesting is just the contrast between that Newcastle game and the United game and then this game. And I realised there was obviously some injuries and, fatigue. It's one of the really tough parts of sport, I think, is to understand how, try and analyse really how these things happen, how you can have such contrasting situations. Now, it might well be that Newcastle were just really poor that night. It might well be, Man United are an amazing team, and we'll get a much better idea as to how good United are this week against Arsenal. So what we do know, though, is that Bodo Glimt aren't a great team. They haven't played any, competitive football in ages. That's a shocking result, really, and it would be a worry. I mean, I've said before, I think Arsenal will win the league by double digits, and I think when you see that type of performance, I don't see any situation other than them running away with the title. I just can't see City being competitive now.
No, I agree with you. I mean, Rodri obviously getting sent off in 50 seconds, 2 bookables. That ACL, he's come back too quickly from it. And we haven't seen a player with an ACL at his age having to play centre midfield with all the twisting and turning. Coming back into the game, he just looks a shadow of himself, which is understandable. He only did it a year ago or 14 months ago. It's a 2-year injury. And he needs some legs around him. And Bernardo and Foden just don't have them. They're not that type of player. I'm surprised they didn't play Reinders. Obviously, Gonzalez is injured. And even with a prime Baresi and a prime Virgil van Dijk, they'd still look bang ordinary at times because they get no protection. They're asked to do things, those centre-backs, that they're not capable of doing. And this is the concern I have over Mark Gahey transfer, that he's going to be asked to do something he's never done in his career before, and suddenly fans are going to jump on his back and go, oh, this and that, is he actually that good? It's a completely different game of football that you play at Man City and to Liverpool extent, where the 2 centre-backs defend and asked to defend as well, out wide and higher up than any other team in Europe barring Barcelona. Those are the only 3 teams that do it that way. But yeah, bad result for Man City. And as I said, after 10 years, I think Guardiola's time's up. bad performance as well. And we're still waiting for the 115 charges to be announced.
Don't hold out much hope, James. We all know that they've done all sorts of nefarious things, and it'll come back, and there'll be no fitting punishment for what they've done. I guess that's the football we live in. Another really good win for Arsenal. Rested plenty of players against a strong Inter Milan team. They've gone there, and I mean, obviously Liverpool went there and won as well recently. Just very comfortable. I tell you what, I do think Arsenal are even better suited to Europe than they are the Premier League. The way they're able to, the slightly slower tempo, it really suits the way they play. And I think they're going to be very, very difficult to beat, certainly over two legs in this Champions League.
Yeah, it's a good performance. I did like how Arteta rotated. Finally, they rotated, didn't play Declan Rice, etc. And Jesus, he's a streaky goal scorer. And it'd be interesting to see if he plays on Sunday. He should be playing on Sunday ahead of Gyökeres.
But Gyökeres stuck one in the top corner, James.
Happy days. Anyone can do that. Every dog has their day. Yeah, it's another impressive. Obviously, they've got a Mickey Mouse game next Wednesday night. They're going to go 8th May, the first team to do it. They've had an easy schedule. Let's not beat the bush about that. They've played Bayern Munich at home, Atletico Madrid at home, who are not the team they were, and they've played Inter away. They've played no one really apart from that. But they've won 7 out of 7. €2 million, I think it is, for a win. Helps the budget for them. They can spend some more money on whoever they want to in the summer again. But yeah, they are probably at the moment the best team in Europe. Well, not the best team in Europe. They haven't played. Let's see in March and April.
I think they're the best team in Europe at the moment.
But they've not won anything. So all this chat when Rooney was talking about it on the game, said our United team of 2008 would batter them. The Man City teams would have beat them easily. They're not in the same class. Their top goal scorer is Gyökeres on 5 or something. So they're not in the same class, and they've not won anything yet. So when the pressure really starts ramping up in the Champions League in March, April, quarter-final stages, let's see how they perform. But yeah, it's impressive.
Tottenham, Thomas Frank, good win against Dortmund, 2-0. Started the game well. I mean, another good finish from Romero. I think they should just stick him up front, to be honest. His finishing's unbelievable. I would say that game did change on that red card. I think by Svensson. I don't know what a red card. Honestly, I watch a game like that. That is never a red card in a million years, and it changed that game. It was very comfortable for Spurs after that. You cannot be giving a red card for that. Yes, I know his leg is. There's no force behind it. His leg is just literally. It's straight, yes, but it's just lay there. It's not. There's no force behind it. It's just such a weird sending off. Basically, you're saying any contact, regardless of force, above an ankle is now a red card, which...
In Europe, it's a red card, but it's not in the Premier League, no.
But there shouldn't be a red card in Europe. I mean, it's just an absolute joke. There's never a red card in any football.
But the interesting with Spurs, they played 3-4-3. Now, whether that's because they had injuries, and they have got a load of injuries, that's a caveat as well, that game. They played 3-4-3. They played Spence left wing back. They played Pedro Porro, obviously, as a right wing back. Adogi as the left-sided centre back. Seemed to be suited. They had a focal point up front in Solanke, first game in a long, long time. And they seem better, but it's 10 men. You can't take anything, you kind of have to take that result with a pinch of salt because you're only playing against 10 men. They looked a lot better, but as you say, the Champions League suits them. Europe is suiting a lot of teams at the moment, including Liverpool as well, because it's very different to the Premier League. And the standard of other teams in Europe is pretty poor at the moment.
I mean, we'll come on to it a little bit later, but when you talk about the strength of the Premier League, I mean, Dortmund are the second best team in Germany, right? They're comfortably clear of third place. They're quite a way behind Bayern, but they are garbage. Like, meant to be the second best team in Germany. I think it just shows you how weak the Bundesliga is at the moment. I mean, it doesn't help the fact that the Premier League keeps stealing all their good players. But Chelsea, Rossinian, an unconvincing 1-0 win against Pathos. All I would say about that game is, I mean, obviously Chelsea wasted a lot of chances, but I don't think we really learned much more in terms of where Chelsea under Rossinian are.
Miles away, light years away from where they need to be.
The Newcastle PSV game was interesting in as much as obviously a very comfortable win for Newcastle. One thing that was interesting, there was a ton of money for Newcastle before that game. Overnight, and just an enormous move for Newcastle. What was interesting was the first 2 goals Newcastle scored were terrible defensive errors.
Handed on the plate to them, like literally. There you go and scored 2 goals in Champions League. Yeah,
it's all right, James.
It's ridiculous.
Gordon got an open play goal for you.
Yeah, well, he couldn't miss from 5 yards out of an open goal. Well, he could, but he didn't. He's bang average.
No, he couldn't miss. I mean, honestly, my 3-year-old could have scored that.
He's bang average, and no one's going to change my mind on him. He's worth about 25, 30 million quid in my view, but he wants to leave Newcastle anyway. So
good result for Liverpool. Good performance from Liverpool.
Yeah, it was a tricky place to go. Changing formation again. They played a box midfield. They played Salah and Ekatiki's 2 wide-ish forwards. It worked. It had a load of chances. Didn't really take them. Szoboszlai, free kicks, clever. Did his homework and then comfortable. Virgil was back into his usual imperious best. His passing, by the way, is just sensational. Long and short. It's ridiculous what you can do with a football. It's crazy. Yeah, they look good. Marseille were disappointing. I mean, that centre midfield pair of Højbjerg, I mean, he's a car horse. It's a shame that individual, the ex-Man United player, won't name his name.
He's a proper player. He's a horrible.
He really is. He's really, really good. He's 2-footed as well. Takes corners left foot and right footed. Can beat a player, stand up a player. I saw Milos Kerkez had his best game for Liverpool actually. As a kid, yeah, he looked really good. But it's interesting with Liverpool, right? So 14 games where teams have played against them that have had more than 15% long balls. Liverpool's record is 1-3, drawn 4 and lost 7. In every other game that's been less than 15% long balls from the opposition, they've won 14, drawn 4 and lost 2. So there's the blueprint.
Well, we knew that was one of the ways to go.
Yeah.
And we saw that. I remember seeing that a few months ago when Villa went to Liverpool because
tried to play football.
Obviously, Martinez made the mistake. Salah scored, and there was actually some success before that. There is. I don't think this is a Liverpool team that's so great that you can't play that way against them. But the lesser teams have certainly had a ton of success against them, just being very, very direct.
Yeah,
I tend to think that's partly because second balls where Liverpool haven't been brilliant, and some of that comes from hunger, some of it just comes from player quality in terms of a lack of a proper defensive midfielder.
And the midfield rotation that sort of asked of the lads to go and rotate, and they're never in the same position. Anna has fascination with PSG, who rotate their 3 in midfield all the time. So when there are second balls, we don't have anyone near that second ball. And we don't, as you say, no defensive midfielder. And Gravenberch is soft as shite in a tackle, won't put himself into a tackle. And McAllister's just been a shadow of himself. So it's not hard to work out where Liverpool's deficiencies are. And again, it'll be interesting to see what happens at Bournemouth tomorrow night. But yeah, they're up to 4th now. They play Karabag in the week. They should get in the top 8.
So let's touch on the rest on that format in terms of the table. So obviously last set of games the next Wednesday night. Every game taking place at 8:00. And that table was so tight. So between, places 6th to 13th, they're all on 13 points. Arsenal obviously top. They've got K-Rat at home. They're going to finish top. Job done. Very impressive. Obviously, Liverpool 4th, as you say, you've got Karabag at home. you have to be winning that game. Finish top 8, job done. Tottenham's a bit more interesting in that they're 5th at the moment, but they're away at Frankfurt. Now, obviously, we were just talking about the German teams a minute ago. They could go there and win that. I think they have to win that game to finish top 8. If they do win that game, though, against Frankfurt, they will finish top 8. So, which would be pretty good effort given how poor they've been domestically this season. Newcastle is 7th. Again, it looks like they would have to go to Paris Saint-Germain and win. They're not helped by Paris Saint-Germain not already guaranteeing themselves a top 8 place. It means Paris Saint-Germain have a lot to play for there.
And they had a shocking result in the week, PSG as well, losing at Sporting.
So that's going to be very tough for Newcastle. Chelsea away at Napoli. Obviously, it's not the Napoli that won a league title a couple of years ago.
But Napoli had another shocking result at Copenhagen, away at Copenhagen. So they're outside they're 25th, aren't they, moment, Napoli? So they need to win to guarantee to get themselves in a playoff anyway.
And
so tough game.
But that should be one of the more interesting games, that and the Newcastle game. And then Man City are 11th at home against Galatasaray. I think if they win that game, there's a good chance they'll finish top 8 because there's so many other teams who will drop points above them. It'll certainly be very close. It could come down to goal difference. But it's shaping up to be a pretty interesting final round. Let's touch on this because how strong the Premier League is looking. Now, obviously, they are helped massively by the format now. The fact that no English team, if anyone wants to level up this Champions League format, it's simply to let teams play against teams from their own country. The English teams have such a massive advantage not having to play against the other 5 teams from the Premier League. And, I don't know why it's originally done like this. Maybe it's just to try and keep Barcelona and Real Madrid apart and that type of stuff historically. But there's no reason why teams shouldn't be able to play teams from their own country. And, whilst the format's like this, English teams are going to dominate.
Yeah, it needs changing. Because in the playoff round, you can draw against each. There's no country protection, they call it, UEFA. So you can, however, we saw it last year when PSG played Brest and beat them 11-0 or something over 2 legs. So, yeah, it's a massive advantage, the English clubs not having to play each other. And as you said, it needs changing. Otherwise, it's completely... You're always going to see 4 or 5 English teams in the top 8, just by the nature of it, the strength of the Premier League with all the money it is.
And then what's interesting about that is if you have the English teams doing that well in the group stages, they're more likely to get, obviously, that extra place from the coefficient because their teams are doing so well. So it ends up becoming a bit of a... it sort of repeats, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of.
It'll just always happen. It'll always be 5 now, yeah.
Let's touch on Europa League quickly. A good win for Villa away at Fenerbahce. Comfortable win. Villa made some changes, not loads of changes. There were certainly a stronger lineup than I was expecting. Thought that, the likes of Tielemans and Cash and Watkins would all be given a rest, but no. Villa in second place in the league now. They've got Salzburg at home, final game, so it should be a top 2 place, and obviously similar to Arsenal, it just means that you end up your second leg at home for the rest of the competition, as long as you're in it. I'm disappointed by Fenerbahce. When you see the likes of John Duran play and how he played, I think Villa had a bit of a touch getting the money for him that they did. His attitude is never the best anyway.
Maybe a reason why you sold him over Watkins back in the day.
Well, there was bigger money on the table as well.
But you also knew there was question marks over Duran's attitude and, ability to actually play. He's only a kid, let's be honest. He's only a kid. But yeah. And
then obviously the other one was Forest lost 1-0 to Braga. A bit of a comical game, really, in that Gibbs White missed another penalty. You know, remember him missing one early in that competition. Had a decisive moment as well. Obviously, Yates scored a worldie own goal, and then Anderson obviously got sent off in injury time for talking
Abusing
out
the ref.
turn. Abusing the ref. Yeah, I mean, whatever, however you want to describe it.
Told the ref to do whatever. Yeah.
All it really means is that Forest will qualify for the top 24, but they're not going to finish in the top 8 now. So it means that potentially 2 extra.
Yeah. The away fans were singing for Dyche to get sacked as well, so they've lost patience with him already, which is quite impressive. And could just Celtic
I always come back to it. I always come back to it. Style of play does matter in terms of how long you get as a manager. We're seeing it with Thomas Frank. We see it with Slot. You know, style of play matters in terms of how long the leash is. If you're playing great football, entertaining, and you're losing, you just get that bit longer. So that's this week's football.
Just touching, Luke, for 1 second. It's just I mentioned Celtic there. They had a half decent result in Italy last night away at Bologna. 2-0 up, obviously down to 10 men, and it was 2-2. So that's good for them, actually. Martin O'Neill's doing a good job there, actually, after their shambles a month or so ago. And Rangers won, but Rangers can't qualify now.
It's not great. Scottish football's not in a great place at the moment, is it?
No.
You wanted to touch on away fans quickly in terms of Champions League, and I know you have personal experience of this in Paris.
It's a farce, mate. It really is. It needs to be a great experience. I used to travel, go and watch Liverpool play away. I was lucky enough to get tickets. I was there in Paris in the 2022 final with all the shenanigans going on. Got in some issues even in Eindhoven back in the day when we played them years ago now. They're treated like absolute animals, United Kingdom football clubs. It's not UK fans as well. It's just clubs from Britain. I look at the things from last night. Villa fans were herded into buses like sheep, taken up to the ground 3 hours before the game, put in a pen with boardings around them, everything like this, sat there for 3 hours in a game. Standard of the toilets, disgusting. No beer, no food. A disgrace, basically. Same as Liverpool and Marseille, weren't allowed to go certain parts of Marseille, had to be in this area by 4:30, so that's the best part of 4.5 hours before the game, because it's 9 o'clock local time. All onto the tube at the same time, stay in the ground after the game for an hour, 2 hours after the game, herded back. They're treated worse than animals. It's ridiculous. We don't treat these opposition fans when they come over here to play like that at all. They're freely able to go up to the ground and do what they want. I saw Dortmund fans happily on the tube on Tuesday night. It's a disgrace how we're treated, and it's about time the UK authorities did something, stood up to UEFA. And even look at what Gianni Infantino said in the week about the FIFA president, when he said that there wasn't any trouble in Qatar World Cup, first time for a long time, and all this business. We've still got living off this history of hooliganism in the 90s, 80s, and 90s. We're not anywhere near as bad as the Europeans are, and it's becoming a joke, and people are turning off going to European games. Start treating humans like humans for football games. It's completely disgraceful, to be honest with you.
So one thing that did come out this week was we saw some new revenue numbers from Deloitte. Certainly as a Villa fan, it was interesting to see where their current revenues are, given such a value is attached to revenue to wages, and in terms of where clubs have to be in terms of new squad cost ratios, both in Europe and domestically. I think what we saw, a couple of things we saw from those numbers were, one is the importance of the Champions League in terms of that extra 40-50 million pounds that you get. The other thing was interesting, Arsenal continued to move up, United continued to move down. Obviously, United, if they do get a new stadium, things will change. Obviously, getting back into Champions League would make a difference as well. But whilst, they are struggling with revenues, there will come a time and a point where the purse strings won't be as open as they might be. So it can get tricky for some of these teams, and it is important in terms of how much they can actually spend. I thought the wages were interesting, James. Liverpool ahead of Manchester City.
Yeah. Liverpool, we know Liverpool
I sense you don't believe it.
Well, one, I don't believe. I'll come on to the other team. But Liverpool pay wages. Liverpool play well, but they also reward them for winning stuff. So it happened when they won in 2020. The wage bill went up. We don't know what the figures are, but I'd imagine they get a huge bonuses. They get flat rates, Liverpool, and they pay well. But they also reward players. You get an enormous amount of bonuses if you win stuff. And obviously winning the league last year made a huge difference to their wage bill and bonuses. Yeah, the 115 is Man City. I mean, come on, like they're saying they've got the biggest commercial in the whole of Europe. Behave. They can't even sell out Champions League games at home. They can't sell out Premier League games. They're building more seats, bigger stand. Why? They just don't have that many fans. And if you go to Asia and you go to America, let's be honest, there's two clubs, Liverpool and Man United. And this commercial revenue stream from Man City, please, it's just absolute horseshit. Just not right. We all know about it, and they're not doing something about it. So just wipe it off. Their wage bill, what they're talking, hardened on 300 grand a week? Make it 500-600 grand a week, please. That's just wake up, smell the coffee, lads. It's their wage bill is astronomical. It's just not being reported properly. We know it's not. So it's just what it is, unfortunately, until you wait for FIFA to do something about it. But as with all the charges, I don't hold any hope that it's going to be done properly. So unfortunately, it's what it is. But yeah, it does prove the point, because every Champions League winning game you get, I think it is like €2 million, £1.5 million, and it's 750,000 for a draw. So that's big money kind of thing.
So one thing you want to talk about, I mean, we've touched on it in terms of, from a slightly different angle, and that's relating to what we'll call shot clock. So I think I'm definitely coming around to the idea that so much time is wasted in football in terms of set pieces, the ball out play. So we see in other sports like rugby, where when the ball goes out play, the clock stops, and then once it resumes, it carries on again. Everyone knows where they're at. We don't have this ridiculous situation where referees are adding arbitrary amounts of extra time depending on how they see fit. No clarity with regard to it. So there was quite an interesting article in The Athletic this week in terms of just what they dubbed the alternative Premier League table, and it's just really a look at how much time the ball was in play for various teams and what may be causing that.
Well, one is set pieces, the way the Premier League's gone. So taking time over taking corners, taking time over taking throw-ins. I mean, the biggest, when I really thought about it, was the Brentford-Liverpool game when Brentford won 3-2 back in October sometime it was. And Brentford had 10 throw-ins, I think, and it took 9 minutes, over 9 minutes to take those throw-ins. It's like just under, 8-9% of the game, considering a game be 98, 99 minutes these days. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Teams on purpose, it's the same as the faking injuries, are doing it on purpose, reducing the amount of time the ball's in play, especially when you play a big team who has more of the ball. You want to slow the play down, of course you do. And it's just part of their tactics. But yeah, I mean, you look at Bournemouth, a 52 minutes, 56 seconds. Tottenham are just over 53 minutes for the ball in play. Those are the two worst teams. And up the top, Man City, Liverpool and Arsenal, quelle surprise. But Man City are 58 minutes, 39 seconds. So they're in nearly 6 minutes more than Bournemouth over a course of a match. That's quite a lot of time when the ball's in play. And it does need to be addressed. Especially corners. the first corner of the game when a referee apparently wants to set his stall out, no handling, no touching, all this business. It can easily waste 45 seconds to a minute on a corner, kind of the first corner of the game, and the referee does nothing about it anyway. And it's never added on at all. Just time wasted kind of thing.
So I think there were a couple of interesting things. One in terms of corners was how long Arsenal actually take for their corners. They're never second highest. Not
who were the top highest? Who were the top?
I can't remember, but I think Arsenal were second. The other thing that was interesting about Manchester City was that their numbers are significantly down on where they've been in previous years. So it reflects a slight change of style from Pep, but also just the importance of set pieces, just generally. So it's just something to keep an eye on. I thought it was quite an interesting article with some actual data associated with it.
Especially when you watch teams and matchups and you see, when you can look at it now and you can go, oh, Bournemouth and Tottenham are playing, and to a certain extent, Newcastle as well, where they do take their time over it and how the game's managed and when the game's managed. I mean, what is it? Even last night, the keeper, the Villa reserve keeper, went down in the second half, kind of thing. It was just like, we know it's going to stop the play, but the referees can't do anything about it. It's farcical kind of thing. But yeah, my thoughts are the captain should only be able to speak to the manager at the time. Every other player has to be away from it. Or you take a player off for a minute, 2 minutes.
Let's touch on one other story that certainly caught my attention this week. I don't know, you may not even be aware of it, but there's a football statistics website called FBref, and it has been one of the prominent statistics or football statistics sites for quite some time now. The data on there is all free. You have all sorts of like quality metrics, and literally overnight they pulled the plug on it. And they were getting the data from OPTA. So what's since transpired is Stats Perform, who own OPTA, have the rights to the World Cup. And they are, let me make sure I describe this correctly, James. They are the first official worldwide betting data and betting streamer rights distributor. And the timing of it can't be a coincidence that they are trying to protect their data ahead of this sort of move. Obviously, different competitions, but it's a bit of a blow to a lot of people who use that data to try and improve the way they the knowledge they have of football. I think it's a real shame. It's, you can get some of that data elsewhere, but still, it is just I think it's just a real shame.
Yeah, it is. It should be readily available, but
problem is big money. Big money is involved with those deals in terms of. I'm intrigued by the streaming rights for the World Cup, given most of it's on domestic TVs, TV channels, that type of stuff. I don't see anyone really going to betting sites and watching World Cup matches on betting sites particularly. Maybe they will. Maybe they, who knows?
Well, yeah, but if you think about it in the BBC, they've got games, and if you don't pay the license fee here in the UK, and you want to go and watch whoever's on BBC a game, and you don't have BBC, then you will have to go and find somewhere to go and watch it. Maybe, I don't know.
We'll see.
I haven't read about it at all. I hadn't heard about it since you mentioned it just now. There.
Yeah, it's just a shame, because I know there's a ton of people who've built models and not just betting, but also fantasy football sites and that sort of stuff, which scrape that data. Now, don't get me wrong, there's no reason why people should be entitled to free data and things like that, but just to take it away without any notice is and no option to then get it back, because they've deleted lots of historical data as well with it. It's tough. It's not ideal. And so a quick touch on the transfer window. Obviously, we've still got another 9 days Well, when's the transfer window end? Is it,
Which is on the 2nd of February because they don't work on weekends.
Monday? Was that a week Monday?
Yeah.
So, a couple of stories. It looks like Forest are going to get Lorenzo Luca on loan from Napoli. Obviously, they're short strikers at the moment. Apparently, it is only a loan with a potential buy, although that's not mandatory, for 40 million. We saw with Forest last night that they need strikers. Jesus out injured, and Awoni was cup tied last night. Well, not eligible, so he can come back.
Yeah.
But they're just very short on strikers with Chris Wood out at the moment. So, I mean, it could be the type of deal that actually makes a massive difference in terms of Forest staying up. I had to laugh a little bit when I saw Douglas Luiz linked with a move to Chelsea on loan. It's just such a random deal. I was never his biggest fan at Villa, and I feel quite smug almost with how that's played out. He's done absolutely nothing since.
I can understand that from a Chelsea point of view, though. Just an extra body in. Can't play Reece James midfield. Lavia's got his injury issues. I mean, and they don't want to pay clearly, I don't think he wants to pay Enzo in a 2 with Caicedo. So I can understand why they want an extra body in, but yes, completely left field.
So a couple of other interesting ones. So it looks like Strand Larsen is being linked with Leeds, having been linked with West Ham this morning. Talk of £40 million. I don't know what these guys are watching. Turning that money down from Newcastle. If the money was genuinely on the table from Newcastle last summer, I guess it just reiterates how poor Newcastle's recruitment teams are at the moment. Trying to spend that sort of money on that type of player.
You haven't got one. It's Eddie Howe and his brother.
Well, I think it's showing. But I don't see where he's not going to start ahead of Calvert-Lewin at the moment, or certainly shouldn't be starting ahead of Calvert-Lewin. Obviously, he can't be relied on. And Leeds, clearly need a little bit more depth up front, but spending 40 million on Strand Larsen would not be the way to go.
Now, a couple of other things. Mateta obviously wants to be out at Palace, doesn't he? So there's rumours wherever he's going. He's 28. He wants to play Champions League football, I'd imagine.
So he's interesting in that, he's out of contract next summer. So, 18 months, limited window for Palace to sell. I don't think they want to get into a Gurhey type situation again, particularly with Glasner effectively gone. Wharton will be gone in the summer. I don't really think they hold quite as many cards as they potentially think. If they get a decent offer for him, it'd be interesting, because Juve won't pay 40 million for him, which is what they want. Villa won't pay 40 million for him. So it's going to be interesting to see. He is 28 as well. He does have a few injury problems at the moment. He doesn't have a track record of continued success either. So he was very poor at Palace before Glasner came in. So that would be an interesting one. I could see why someone like Villa want him if the deal's right. They're very much in a win now type situation, and he would give competition to Watkins. It's very difficult to buy top quality strikers who can actually make a difference for reasonable sums of money. When you see the likes of Oscar Bob, obviously not a striker, but going for 35 million plus potentially to Fulham. 30 million just doesn't get you very much for your money these days.
No, there's a couple other, obviously, like Harry Wilson's out of contract. He's stopped negotiations by the looks of it at Fulham. He's out of contract in the summer. You got Casemiro's decided he wants to leave Man United finally. One of the biggest waste of money's worst transfers ever in the Premier League. £70 million, 350 grand a week for a cart horse who was finished at Real Madrid at 29. Yeah, great business, United, but they'll be happy to get rid of him on his wages as well.
Won trophies, James.
Great.
Looks like good chance Abraham ends up at Villa, actually. So Villa, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, having got rid of Marlon, what business they do. They definitely need some players in. It looks like Leon Bailey's returned from his loan at Roma, so that's going to be fun watching him over the next few months. But any other transfer stuff caught your eye, James? It's going to be interesting because, as you say, there's like 9 days or something left of the window, and there's a few teams who could potentially need to do stuff. It's just so difficult to do deals at this time of year.
Yeah, no, the one I'll bring him on just because of this point I want to bring up very briefly is Mark ter Stegen has gone to Girona from Barcelona. The German goalkeeper ter Stegen, sorry. He's gone to Girona. Now, everywhere else, barring in the UK, you're allowed to play against your parent club. So it doesn't make a difference if you're on loan. So Barcelona put in a clause in his contract that he's not allowed to play for Girona against Barcelona in the game coming up. I don't know why, but anyway, Girona obviously are arguing about that and they want to pay some money for it. But yeah, if you loan players between Premier League teams, you should be able to play against your parent club. If you're prepared to loan a player to another club, why are you worried about him playing against you in the fixture against him? We're the only country that does it. It's complete nonsense. You can play against whoever, relegation rivals, title rivals, but you can't play against your parent club. That needs changing. We're the only country that does it.
It just favours the big teams so much. So I remember Chelsea had a little run last year where, I just remember they had 4 or 5 games almost in a row where they'd be against teams who have loaned one of their players, and then, particularly I think teams like it was Southampton with Ugo Chokwu, and I think Broha was Broha there somewhere? I can't remember. But there were loads of players that Chelsea had loaned out, and each week they were playing against a team which was missing one of their most important players because they'd been loaned from Chelsea. It is a bit of a nonsense.
If you loan a player, you should be able to play whenever they want.
Okay, let's have a quick look at let's talk about this week's matches. I think obviously the highest profile match of the weekend is obviously Arsenal against Manchester United at the Emirates. I guess the interesting part of this is which Manchester United turn up. Is it the Manchester United who destroyed City last week, or is it the Manchester United we've seen for large parts of the season?
Yeah, I'd imagine they'll be unchanged. Everyone's back fit. Dorgy off the left, Diallo off the right, Bruno in the 10, and they're playing Mbemba as a striker and try and rotate those 4. Kobbie Mainoo, will he go and do what he did to Rodri on the weekend and go and sit on Martin Zubimendi? Stop that ball progression from the 2 centre-backs, Saliba and Gabriel, if they're both playing. Liverpool showed the blueprint, and it ended up being a couple of long passes from Declan Rice to try and get the ball up the pitch. I don't think that's what Man United will do. They'll ask Mainoo to go and try and pressurise Zubimendi on the ball to stop him turning and getting the play up the pitch. Yeah, I would like to see Jesus.
He's not suited to that role, surely.
No, I know, but he did it very well. You watch it again against Rodri. He pressurised Rodri all the time, and he will try. I'd imagine that's what they'll try again if they have the same way of doing it. Liverpool showed the blueprint. Szoboszlai and Wirtz basically took it in turns to try and stop Zubimendi turning around and facing forward. United don't have a bad record at the Emirates anyway, so you just don't know. It's the second game under Carrick. He's had the week to prepare. Arsenal had an away game in Inter. Okay, it was Tuesday night, so they've got a load of recovery time, etc. It's still a big game. It's still, he's got the history behind it anyway. It's going to be a big build-up. It's on Sky here in the UK. Everyone's going to be watching it throughout the whole world as well. Pressure's still on Arsenal kind of thing, especially if Man City beat Wolves. So I wouldn't be piling into Arsenal at 1.6, 2's on essentially. It'd be interesting if I'm Arteta, I'm playing Jesus. I said he's a streaky goal scorer. He goes on these little runs where he scores and he's a better fit for them if he plays. Will Arteta have the proverbial to drop Gyökeres, his son? Let's see.
Certainly going to be interesting that match is certainly going to be an interesting one. I think it is important that Man City actually start. If anyone is going to challenge Arsenal, Man City, at home against Wolves. It's amazing how football changes so quickly. 2 or 3 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, you wouldn't have given Wolves a prayer of going there and getting much of a result. When you see that City team and that performance and the way Wolves are actually playing, I mean, obviously you still expect City to win comfortably, but it's still not beyond the realms of possible. It's not the outside chance, I think, that it was maybe, as I say, a month ago.
No, and you'll see Semenyo will be back. Obviously, Mark Gay will make his debut if he's fit and available. Obviously, when we're recording this, the press conferences are going on at the moment, so we don't actually imagine those back. Just if City play that high line again, I can definitely see Wolves players getting in behind them, just whether they can take their chances. Again, City need to put a performance in, let alone result. They need to start playing better. Because at the moment, they're not playing anywhere near what they should be playing. Cherky will probably start. He's going to have to start at some point.
But I don't think they can have Doku, Semenyo, and Cherky in the same lineup.
Yeah, I don't think. Or Pep hasn't showed any inclination of doing it at the moment.
Are you going to drop Doku or Semenyo already? Going to get dropped?
They'll play Semenyo just because he hasn't played in the week, and he's a goal threat. He's more of a goal threat than Doku. Yeah, to start winning some games. They haven't won this calendar year, have they? They beat Newcastle, but they've had 3-4 draws in a row, kind of thing in the league. Well, they obviously lost to Man United, but they haven't won. I don't think they've won. Yeah, that's bad.
We've got Bournemouth, Liverpool. Interesting. Bournemouth haven't been great still. I mean, they were good against Brighton in that first half the other day, and then they were relatively poor second half. So I'm not quite sure where Bournemouth are at. But again, Liverpool coming into it on the back of an away game in Europe. Interesting.
It's interesting. Liverpool stayed in Marseille on Wednesday night, flew back to Liverpool yesterday to aid the recovery, and they're obviously flying down to Bournemouth today. So haven't had any time to practice or train or anything like that. It just depends, again, the stats earlier, which way Bournemouth play. They tend not to play the blueprint way of knocking the ball long, but they might. I wonder if Vieira change it and goes, all right, lads, we'll just go and smash it up front and play that way. Canate won't be playing. His father, unfortunately, passed away in the week, so he won't be playing. Gomez, can he back it up after his performance in the week? We'll see. I'd imagine that they'll go the same way. Tough away game. Not got a great 2-0 last time. They haven't. Yeah, it's Saturday night, 5:30. You don't know which Liverpool team are going to turn up. That's the thing. It could be good Burnley, 1 week and then Burnley, Tottenham. Yeah.
Burnley, Tottenham's interesting. Burnley are the worst team in the league by most metrics, apart from points. They haven't been great. Having said that, I'm still not convinced away trips to Turf Moor are all that easy. I don't think they've probably got the results that they necessarily have deserved in recent weeks. They've been very competitive in a few games. Things like that Newcastle game, they've obviously ended up losing. And you look at the scoreline and it looks a comfortable loss. But they were very much in that game for large parts of it. So I don't think the trip to Turf Moor is that easy. Parker will set them up pretty negatively, I suspect, sit back. And we've seen, Tottenham have this strange situation where their away record is really, really good this year. And yet I remember so many of those away games where they've not actually played that well, but got results. Things like Everton, Leeds, those sorts of games. But it's time for Frank to back up the win against Dortmund. You can't be going to Burnley and losing. You can't really be going to Burnley and drawing either. So if Frank doesn't want to come under big pressure, he needs to get a a win there. I think they do have so many injuries, though. I mean, Bergval's now out for 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, can they put an 11 out? They're going to have no one on the bench, so that 11 basically is going to have to win them the game. Solanke, can he back it up again as well? Can he play another 70, 80 minutes after playing that long and being out for that long as well? So, yeah, they need to go up there.
They can play Tell, and they have a few options.
You think Tell's going to be happy to play for Frank after being dropped out of the Champions League squad to bring Solanke back in?
No, but you get paid to play.
Yeah, but we know these players at the moment, they can throw their toys out the pram. Not just having to go at Matthias Tell, by the way. It's more that modern day footballers are quite happy to throw their toys out the pram. And anyway, yeah.
I think one relatively interesting game as well. I think Forest away at Brentford's interesting, just as much as Brentford will obviously have the whole week to prepare for this game. They're much better at home. Forest, another poor result away at Braga. They're probably slightly unfortunate to lose that game, but it's amazing that when you're struggling, how many things just don't go your way. And they don't have a huge, they're not rotating the team that much at the moment. There was a couple of changes. Aina was at left back, and Savona, who looks dreadful, was at right back. So there was a few changes, but I think that's going to be a tough old game for Forest going to Brentford. They are lacking in confidence as well, Forest.
Brentford win that game. I fancy them big time. You talked about it briefly there, that Forest have got no goals in their team. And if you haven't got any goals in your team, then you get win games. But you've got no goal threat behind. And yeah, Brentford didn't play too badly at Chelsea, just didn't take their chances. So the week off helps them. Yeah, Brentford for me they're good at home. I would even money, yes, please.
Crystal Palace, Chelsea. So I'm intrigued to see what happens with Chelsea in terms of Rafinha. Again, obviously Chelsea had a relatively easy Champions League game midweek, but Palace actually have a week off with no Conference League this week, and chance to get a few bodies back, vaguely healthy. Palace is always a tricky place to go. I don't know if Palmer's going to be fit for Chelsea. Rafinha almost intimated that he would be, but I'm yet to be convinced. If Chelsea want to finish top 4 or 5 Champions League places, you've got to be going to places like Selhurst Park and getting results.
I just need to have a look at that. Who plays right wing back for Palace? Because Munoz, I've not heard anything about him. Klein can't play that, and the young lad
Devaney,
he's just back. It's cool. He's just never played any career. You can see it as well. So they're kind of fitting in there. So I worry with Palace that hand side, and I do worry what's been going on behind closed doors in Palace this week with the Glasner news. Obviously, lost last week at Sunderland. Mark Gay gone. Mateta, as we talked about. Wharton, we've talked about. The wheels are falling off there, and it could go horribly wrong very quickly if they're not careful.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. Obviously, the big game of the weekend, it's not obviously Arsenal, Manchester United. It's clearly Newcastle, Villa. Villa are ready for their annual pilgrimage to St James's Park to get absolutely thumped. Obviously, Newcastle had a relatively easy game against PSV on Wednesday. And the big news out of that was that Bruno left with an ankle injury. Hopefully, he misses out for this game. I don't wish injuries on players, but I think he is their best player, and him missing out would be big.
Yeah, there's a stat on there for any statos out there that so he's joined nearly 4 years ago, and Newcastle have never won a Premier League game in that time that he hasn't started. Just have a think about that. That's a ridiculous, absolute madness. He's also got an ankle injury. That's why Eddie Howe was so concerned. I mean, I think his press conference was going on.
You're going to tell me that that's only 3 matches, though, aren't you?
Well, whatever it is, it's quite where's Eddie Howe's contract? He hasn't done it. Oh, he has done it, but he said he hopes to see him be fit. So who knows? But yeah, I don't know what. Have Villa flown back overnight from Istanbul? It's a 4-hour flight from Istanbul. They've stayed over there, and then
It's
there's no training.
It's a very tricky one. Villa are obviously short on central midfielders as well. The good news, I guess, is that Onana returned against Fenerbahce, coming on as a sub. Should mean that he's in position to go here for this game. Makes a massive difference to this Villa team. And yeah, I don't hold out that much hope for Villa, honestly. I don't know why. We just do it abysmally there.
So yeah, so I just checking there. The Eddie Howe press conference was saying that reasonably positive. Well, that's just managers speak. Dan Burn is back in full training, so they've got some. Well, he'll probably be on the bench, I'd imagine. Form, of course, he is going to say that. So yeah, these managers' press conferences are a bit ridiculous at times.
Yeah, I think that would be the thing I would reiterate ahead of, when we're doing these look aheads, is a lot of the team news isn't known yet. That'll sort of filter through on later in the day, and it does change things. Any other games? Obviously, you got Everton, Leeds. Everton obviously get a lot of their AFCON players back and stuff, but Grealish looks like he's out for a few weeks. Sorry. Not the most exciting of games, that one. And then I guess West Ham, Sunderland. West Ham obviously is again a good opportunity for them to get points to put pressure on Forest. Sunderland have been going great, but you look at the fixture list from a West Ham perspective, and you'd much rather be playing Sunderland than you would an Arsenal. Let's be honest, it's a very winnable game for them, but they haven't really shown talent or inclination to win these sorts of games.
Again, Sunderland got their AFCON players back, haven't they, as well? So that's big for them. They did very well when they weren't available. So 6-point running. Well, Sunderland aren't going down. They've done a remarkable job in the first 21 games of the season. It's not a really game that excites me, to be honest with you.
No. In terms of other football, one interesting game on Sunday is Hearts play Celtic at Hearts. Feels like it's going to be very big in terms of title race. Martin O'Neill's clearly getting a tune out of the Celtic players once again. So this will be a pretty massive game in terms of outcome of the title this year.
Yeah, Sunday, 3:00, Hearts Celtic. Yeah, Hearts obviously lost last week on penalties in the cup. Probably quite happy they're out of the cup, to be honest with you. They've had the week off. Obviously, Celtic played last night, Bologna, so travelling back again. We talk about it all the time, but it does play a huge part playing away in Europe when you're getting back at either Friday early morning or Friday afternoon. Yeah, and Rangers play at the same time to Dundee. So if Hearts win that, they're almost like 9 points clear or something of Celtic. So. And then in the other words, you got Munich are playing at home to Augsburg. Can they get? Do you reckon they'll end up with a plus 100 goal difference this season in the Bundesliga?
What a waste of it! What a waste of everyone's time that league is. Should we touch on other sports quickly? We don't really have. It probably makes sense to add other sports on quickly to this. Obviously, some golf carrying on in Dubai. Patrick Reed led last time I saw. Fleetwood and Rory are playing at the moment. In America, Amex Championship, Scheffler's won back last night on 9 under. Crazy low scoring across a couple of those courses. I think it was 29 players who are 7 under or better. I mean, absolutely bonkers.
Target golf.
So it's certainly interesting to see how that goes. But I always think from a betting perspective, I used to hate those tournaments where there's so much low scoring like that.
It's the putting competition essentially at the end of the day.
Rugby, James?
No, not really. Some fallout with the Six Nations squad's been announced by the England one. France have left out a couple of big players like Damien Penaud, their top try scorer ever, has been left out their Six Nations first game against Ireland squad. Don't know what Gauti has been up to, but yeah, there's a bit of Premiership and not much. It's all building up to that France Ireland game on Thursday, the 5th of February.
Cricket. So obviously we had the pleasure of watching England lose to Sri Lanka, lose another ODI. They lost by 19 runs. Sri Lanka put a decent total on the board, 271. England were in pretty reasonable shape chasing and then fell in a heap.
Yeah, but I have this issue with, sorry, briefly, I know it's a football podcast today, but cricket, when you're chasing 270 under lights, you've got to get ahead of the run rate. And England were way behind the run rate at times, and then trying to catch up against spin, and England can't play spin, under lights to ball gripped. Kel Surprise they lost. Yeah.
Big Bash continues.
Yeah, Sydney Sixers have just beaten Hobart, so they will play Perth in the final on Sunday at 8 o'clock UK time in Perth against Perth Scorchers.
I guess one piece of news is that Bangladesh, I mean, we touched on it in the other sports podcast, is that they are out the T20 World Cup. They didn't want to play in India, and yeah.
Not confirmed yet, because the government stepped in, the Bangladesh government said, hang on a minute, we want to play, but so the ICC have given them another 24 hours, but it doesn't look promising at all. They're refusing to play in India, basically, is the argument behind that, because of political tensions. They want all their games to be played in Sri Lanka.
Earlier in the week, Littler won in Saudi Arabia, so he played some unbelievable darts at various points that week. Tennis, we've got the Oz Open continuing at the moment.
Yeah, it's basically all the Brit girls are out. Raducanu thumped again, no surprise. It's just ridiculous. As one of our mates said, it's like, just because she won the US Open 4.5, 5 years ago now, everyone expects her to go places. She's, I mean, the most remarkable major win I think I've ever seen. She's just what she is, a top 50 player in the world that will have her day, and most of the other time when she plays against a fellow opponent that's better than her will get thumped. She uses every excuse under the book. This time it was the wind was too strong on one side of the court. Isn't that the same for the opponent as well? Anyway,
sounds like she's full of hot wind, to be honest. Obviously, a bit of racing. Obviously, you touched on it the other day. Cheltenham this weekend, always fun to watch.
Yeah, the Cheltenham Trials Day. So you've got briefly Serginho versus the New Lion. You've got Grey Dawning in the big race as well. You've got the cross country handicap chase leading up to Cheltenham. It's all on ITV here in the UK. Obviously, Racing TV starts at 12:05, so something to watch tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, looking forward to watching. I think Serginho versus the New Lion will be champion hurdle form kind of thing.
So, in terms of boxing, we saw Chisora versus Wilder announced in London for, I think, 4th of April. Worth watching, I suspect. And then I think there's a bit of UFC this weekend, isn't there?
Paddy the Baddie Pimlet. He's always good fun to watch on there. He's a bit like Marmite, but he's a good fun. Is how he sells his fights is brilliant. It's fantastic. Obviously, watching clips and things like that of him overnight. He's fighting Justin Gaethje, I think. It's how you pronounce it. Excuse my pronunciation. In a lightweight world title fight from Las Vegas on Saturday night, Las Vegas time. So Sunday morning is probably a 4 o'clock UK time start. In the lightweight title fight, UFC. He's favourite Paddy Pimlet, first big title fight. He's got, if you talk about confidence, that lad's got it in abundance. So, brutal sport. Yeah, I won't be, it's on box office, unfortunately, but I'm sure I'll find somewhere to watch the highlights of the replay on Sunday at some point.
Should we touch on NFL? Well, let's touch on NFL. Obviously, we have the championship round, so effectively the semi-finals. It always annoys me in America when they talk about divisional matches and championship matches. It's the semi-finals in essence. We have New England at Denver. So obviously the big news in this particular game is that Bo Nix is out. Stidham has come in. We touched on him on Monday. Doesn't have a huge amount of experience. I think he's 1 and 3 in terms of games played for Denver. It presents a real problem for Denver, and the markets have moved quite a lot on the back of it. Maybe potentially too much, but it'd be tough to have huge amounts of confidence, placing hard-earned money on Stidham, getting you across the line. I think one thing that is interesting relative to Bo Nix is that he doesn't run nearly as effectively as Bo Nix does. So he's much more a sort of pocket passer. He's not helped potentially by a couple of wide receivers, Bryant, although he looks like he may be fit. And Franklin may have injuries as well. I guess a lot of it will be how much pressure New England can put on him. And, and I guess vice versa. It'd be interesting to see, Denver probably got the best pass rush in the league, and whether they can get to May. May has shown vulnerabilities in these couple of playoff games. 6 fumbles in 2 games is an awful lot. And, this Denver rush might have a field day. But it's just going to be an interesting game to see how it pans out. It does feel like it's going to be a battle of, which quarterback, comes out on top.
Which quarterback makes less mistakes? That's what it'll be about. Turnovers and less mistakes from quarterbacks.
Well, I think the big thing for Stidham is to get help. He needs a lot of help. So he needs that Denver running game to be effective. He needs Harvey. I mean, there was some chat that Dobbins might be available, but he needs Harvey to, be elite. Just to take the pressure off him and, focus the attention away from him a little bit. What I would expect is lots of quick short passes from him. That's what you normally see when you have a quarterback in there who is relatively inexperienced in terms of game time.
Yeah, he won't be standing in the pocket relatively early in the game. He'll be get the ball, get rid of the ball kind of thing.
I'm intrigued to see how May does. Obviously, very highly touted and has looked very good at various points this year. So, big stage. He couldn't ask for much more than the way this season is shaping up. If he wants to be elite, needs to be winning the Super Bowl. And then in the other game, we've got Rams and Seahawks. Obviously, we've had this game a couple of times this year. Both won 1, lost 1. Seahawks had that great comeback just a few weeks ago. Absolutely bonkers game. I remember watching that at the time thinking that the Rams were just a better team than Seahawks, certainly in terms of all-round balance. What's transpired since then is that Rams haven't played anywhere near as well as they were then, and the Seahawks are probably playing better. Seahawks come into this with, having come off that easy game against San Francisco, whereas, Rams had that very tricky game away at the Bears. For Seattle, they are missing Charbonnet, he will be a miss as a running back to complement Walker because, he does a lot of their goal line work, short yardages, things like that. So they do have AJ Barner, who is tight end by trade. It's their sort of version of the tush push, something to keep an eye on. But it's been pretty successful this year. I think they've converted on 11 out of 12 times they've tried it. Again, as you say, so much of it will come down to whether Rams can put pressure on Darnold. Darnold has a capacity to self-destruct. So, but if Darnold can cut those errors out, then you have to like the Seahawks' chances.
And Rams in its third away game in a row.
It takes its toll. It's not easy.
I say it in football, I say it in others. Traveling, I know the players are used to it, but it's still this stage of the season. What's it? Game 21 of the season, 18, no, 21 it is. 3 away games in a row. It starts getting hard work. Different places, different environments. It'll be loud there in Seattle on Sunday night. I mean, it's a late one here in the UK, but it'll still be 11:30 kickoffs. It's the second game.
I think what's going to be important in that game is, obviously the start always makes a difference. But if Seattle can get ahead and sort of control that game, obviously Rams have got weapons, but it becomes a long old game for Rams if they're trailing, I think, early on. And actually,
Seattle are good front runners.
They are good front runners. I don't think they're built to, and it's weird because they did come back against the Rams just a few weeks ago. But as a general rule, I don't think the Seahawks are brilliant at coming back into overturning big leads. So should be fascinating. Super Bowl 8th of February in San Francisco in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, somehow I have to stay awake for that Rams Seahawks game. I don't know how I'll do it, but I'd rather watch that than the Patriots Broncos. But there you go. If I had the choice.
So we do have a question from a viewer, and if you do have questions, fire them in, and we'll do our best to answer them. It's from Rob C 1819. He said, very enjoyable show, these lads. Definitely space in podcast land for informed, considered opinions instead of the usual inane drivel produced by talking heads. Luke has mentioned that XG isn't a great metric. It's made out to be. It would be great to know which metrics you think are under and overrated in other sports you price up and bet on. So I think just sort of clarify a little bit with XG. XG is a useful stat in as much as getting an idea as to the types of chances teams are creating. It's just not the be all and end all that it's made out to be by certain people, I think, in the media. I think you have to use a whole variety of sort of data sources, which sort of complement each other. I think you also have to just appreciate that, the people making these markets have way more data than is publicly available. So the way a lot of the syndicates have made their money, whether it be in football or other sports, whether it be racing, is by creating their own data sets. They've collected their own data, and they use that data, to place their bets. And that's how Bloom, a Star Lizard, they have models that will be a couple of iterations ahead of XG that they rely heavily on. And so what I think you have to be a bit careful of is all public-facing data on its own holds a limited amount of value when there's a lot of other data out there that's more valuable, probably. And, in terms of the various sports, I think football, there's certain things you see in football which is, I'd say is better data than others. So when I see things like save completion rates for goalkeepers, I think it's a really poor metric to measure the quality of a goalkeeper. When you see how much possession a team has, again, I don't think it's a great metric for how good a team is. Things like possession stats, again, similar. What those stats don't tell you is if it's a 5-yard pass with no one around the player, or whether it's a 40-yard pass, into a crowded area. And so I think all the stats need context. And I think in terms of football, I tend to find that things like the eye test matter as well. I don't think it's just an eye test. I think it's data and eye test. So I think a really good example would be someone like Van Hecke at Brighton. Is he flags so highly on so many stats, whether it be things like ball progression and passing completion rates, all sorts of sort of offensive metrics for defenders. He excels in that area. Some of that is related to how Brighton play, but when you actually watch him as a defender, he looked bang average. The data would suggest he's a really, really great defender. But when you actually watch him play, he isn't a great defender in any shape or form. And, in the right situation, alongside the right centre backs, he could be great. But, he could also be really poor in a team that doesn't pass it around in the way that Brighton do. So I do think eye test matters, and it's the same across all sports. Anything to add, James?
No, not really. It's just when you're looking at data in football, as I say, like they still go on about assists in football. It's just like you have a 1 yard assist, or assist is just the last possession from a player to another player. So it could be a 40-yard ball, or it could be a 4-yard ball kind of thing. Big chances for forwards is a big thing. Big chances created is a big thing. But then that's how defined by individuals and companies. Like as you said, with betting syndicates, they define it differently to OPTA or whoever, which company they're not really interested in betting. So there are certain things you need to look at, and how matchups have changed in football. Definitely, like it's come from America sports, where matchups play a huge role in how you view a game or how you bet on a game per se. Like we've seen it regularly, how teams don't play well against certain opposition, whether that's the head coach, manager, or it's just the players within that team.
So I think first, if you think about other sports, I think golf's a sport that when I started betting in golf, the amount of data out there was so limited. So you didn't have hole by hole, shot by shot. So you'd have the whole data. So it'd be like, oh, he's got a par, and what you ended up with was really rudimentary statistics, things like putts per round, fairways hit, greens in regulation. But again, those data points are really poor. I mean, there's one thing about all the strokes gained stuff that's come in is you get a much better appreciation, some kind of context on that data. And I think with something like golf is that, again, there are people out there who are getting data ahead of others, or more data ahead of others. It does happen. And again, I think for golf, it's, certain statistics are more repeatable than others. So if you have a player, for example, who is, a very average putter, who has an incredible day putting, it's quite tough to repeat that. Now, if he's done it for 3 rounds, that might be different. But certainly, there's very short sample sizes of 1 round. It probably gets overrated a little bit. And in the same way that actually I tend to find things like iron play is a bit more repeatable. So if someone's absolutely flushing their irons, you often see that can carry on for, the rest of the tournament. Doesn't always work out that way, but certain stats are more useful, let's say, than others. And then you also have, again, the eye test. A lot of the data you see, it doesn't, account for things like luck. You can have a player hits a drive, hits a tree, it was going out of bounds, rebounds into the middle of the fairway. It shows as a fairway hit, brilliant. The reality is that shot was a lot worse than that. And, things like luck, it does make a difference in a sport like golf. And even in things like cricket. So I tend to think things like player misses and things like that, it is a good metric for how a batsman is actually doing. I always think back to, was it Rory Burns? Well, it wasn't Rory Burns. Who was it in New Zealand that time? Was it Rory Burns? I can't remember. There was a player for England opening who probably had...
It would have been Burns, yeah.
It might have been Rory Burns. He probably had like 70 player misses. I think he had the most player misses ever by a player. But what it does, it gives an idea that they've probably been quite fortunate that they haven't nicked one. And, it's a much better metric than seeing that he scored 140 or something. If you're having that much good fortune, scoring that sort of total isn't the achievement it might be in others, a chanceless 100.
Yeah, I mean, quickly on golf before we finish up, like Till Hatton yesterday had 3 chip-ins from off the green, or 3 off the green. He had one in Dubai yesterday where I think either the ball landed in the sprinkler head or his foot was landing on the sprinkler head. Can't can't quite remember it. But anyway, he was going to be in the rough off the green. Obviously, got a free drop to the first cut and chipped in for a birdie. I mean, that's just luck. Like, kind of, he admitted it. Like, he would have been struggled to get up and down. Could have easily made bogey, but 2-shot swing. You look at the stats. He held the ball off the green. It's there in the stats, and you actually go, well, actually need to deep further into it and go, well, how lucky to get that's not coming up on stats. Well, on the ready available stats, there's people out there who will be having that in their stats kind of thing and built it in. So yeah, it's always worth looking at behind the top level stats, and if you want to look at it and go into it further, it is available. You might have to go and watch it, but
I think the way I would always look at stats is, in terms of from a betting perspective, is what is out there that the big companies aren't necessarily able to record or put into data. How can you differentiate yourself to what the big boys are doing, and also understanding how they might use data as well. At the end of the day, they have teams and teams of Oxbridge analysts, Oxbridge graduates doing, running all the models and everything else. Super smart guys, huge resources, and you have to try and understand how you could potentially get an edge against those types of players.
Yep. Anyway, should we round it up?
Yeah, let's call it a day.
Good, right. Enjoy your weekend, Luke. I'll be watching some horse racing tomorrow, a bit of the football, but obviously the NFL is probably the big takeaway from that last segment of the game. But yeah, enjoy. We'll speak on Monday. I think we're going to continue this format, aren't we? Do a Monday morning football pod and then do a Monday night one with a roundup of the sport and a look ahead of the other sports going ahead in the week. I think it kind of worked quite nicely this week. I've had a couple of comments back as well. So yeah, any feedback is greatly appreciated, good and bad, so we can improve. Let us know.
Get any questions in. Any questions, and we'll try and answer them.
Yeah. I'll see you all next Monday.